You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
Imagine finally moving into your dream apartment, a sleek, luxurious complex built fresh on the grounds of a demolished psychiatric hospital. It seems like the ideal spot to leave the past behind, but for one tenant, this supposed paradise quickly descends into an unsettling series of events. At first, they're just minor annoyances, flickering lights, strange whispers, and appliances acting strangely. But soon, these disturbances intensify into a living nightmare. Was it just paranoia, or something far more sinister lingering within those new walls? Listen carefully, because the deeper truth might make you reconsider your own home. If you enjoy real, spine-chilling horror stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more frightening tales sent in by viewers just like you. Remember, the place you call home might be hiding secrets darker than your worst fears. I want to share something that happened to me, an experience that still keeps me up at night. I've changed names and locations for privacy, but I need to get this out. In early 2023, I moved into a brand new apartment complex on the outskirts of my hometown. I'll call it Redwood Apartments. It was advertised as a luxury building with surprisingly affordable rent, the perfect place for a fresh start after a rough couple of years in my life. The complex was built on the site of an old psychiatric hospital that had been demolished not long before. I knew about that from a quick internet search, but I brushed it off as just an interesting bit of trivia. It didn't bother me at all at the time. I was just excited to have a modern, pristine place of my own. From the first night, though, I started noticing little things. Minor oddities, easy enough to rationalize. The lights in my unit, sleek new recessed LEDs, would flicker occasionally. Not constantly, just quick pulses of light or brief dimmings out of the blue. I remember joking to myself that the building was so new, maybe the paint hadn't dried on the wiring. My brand new microwave would sometimes beep as if someone was pressing its buttons when I was across the room. The smart thermostat kept resetting itself to a chilly 60 degrees at midnight. These were little annoyances, but I figured they were just growing pains of new construction, nothing more. And sometimes, late at night, I'd hear muffled voices through the walls. They were so faint I could never make out words, just a vague murmur, like a TV left on in a distant room. I assumed it was just neighbors up late, or maybe the building's ventilation playing tricks with sound. At that point, I had a logical explanation for everything. The building still smelled new, a mix of fresh paint, new carpet, and clean drywall. But every so often, usually in the early morning hours, I'd catch a different scent in the hallway near my door. It was subtle but distinct. A whiff of antiseptic, like a hospital cleaning solution. It always vanished after a few seconds, leaving me to wonder if I'd imagined it. One night I even thought I smelled something burnt, like singed hair or plastic, as I passed by the electrical room. It was so brief that I shrugged it off and went back inside. Odd smells, flickering lights, weird noises. Nothing truly unexplainable, right? I kept telling myself that. In my second week at Redwood Apartments, the strange occurrences intensified. I came home from work one evening to find my front door unlocked and slightly ajar. I knew I had locked it that morning. Nothing inside was missing, but I felt a rush of unease as I checked every closet and corner. The only thing I did find was odd. A small handprint smudged on the inside of the door, near the bottom, as if a child had pressed their hand into the drywall dust. It wiped away easily, and there were construction crews still working on finishing touches in some units, so I tried to believe one of them had been in my apartment and left the door unlatched by accident. It was the only explanation that made sense, and yet it didn't sit right with me. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept imagining someone had been in my home. Around 2 a.m., just as I was finally drifting off, I woke to a soft... It was a rhythmic knocking sound coming from somewhere in my bedroom wall. I held my breath, listening. It stopped. I was settling back down when it started again, this time from the ceiling above me. 3 slow knocks. Heart pounding, I got up and pressed my ear to the wall. The drywall felt cold. At first, I heard nothing. Then, just as I was about to pull away, I heard a faint whisper. I couldn't make out any words, but it sounded like someone pleading or praying, the tone hushed and desperate. I must have listened for a solid minute, not moving a muscle, until I realized I was holding my breath and starting to feel dizzy. I pulled back, my mouth dry. "It's just the plumbing or the ducts," I whispered to myself. Maybe water in the pipes can sound like a knock. Maybe the wind in the vents can whisper. I wasn't sure I believed that, but I needed to if I wanted any hope of sleeping again. By week 3, I was on edge constantly. The atmosphere in my apartment had changed. It felt charged, like the quiet tension in the air before a thunderstorm. The flickering lights became more frequent and more eerie. Sometimes they would dim and brighten in a steady pulse, almost like some invisible hand was sliding a dimmer switch back and forth. One evening, I stepped out into the hallway to take the trash to the chute. The corridor was empty and still. As I walked, the overhead lights flickered and for an instant plunged the hall into shadows. In that brief flash of darkness, I thought I saw a figure at the far end by the stairwell door, just a silhouette of a person standing deathly still. The lights blinked back on, and no one was there. I even walked down to the stairwell and opened the door to look. Nothing. I could feel my pulse in my throat as I hurried back to my apartment, telling myself I'd imagined it, that it was just a trick of the eyes in bad light. Up until then, I hadn't spoken to anyone about these incidents. I didn't want to sound crazy over a few flickering bulbs and restless nights. But after the hallway figure, I casually asked a neighbor if he'd noticed the lights acting weird. He said, "Oh, you too?" "Yeah, I figure the wiring's not great. I'm sure they'll sort it out." He hadn't seen anything like what I had, or if he did, he didn't mention it. I didn't bring up the voices or the handprint. Part of me was worried that it was just me, that maybe stress and lack of sleep were getting to my head. That Friday, determined not to spend another anxious night alone, I invited a close friend over, I'll call her Marissa, to hang out and see the new place. Having someone else there did help lift my spirits at first. We ordered pizza, watched a comedy on Netflix, and for a few hours I almost forgot about my strange experiences. But later in the evening, Marissa went to use the bathroom. A moment later I heard her call my name, sounding puzzled. I walked in and found her staring at the mirror. The room was humid from the hot water she'd run to wash her hands, and on the fogged mirror there were letters streaked through the moisture. 3 words, "Leave now, my name." For a second, I just stood there, thinking my tired eyes were playing tricks. But Marissa saw it too, my name clear as day. She half smiled and asked if this was my idea of a joke. I could only shake my head. I wiped the mirror with a towel, heart hammering in my chest. Marissa left shortly after, clearly unnerved, and I couldn't blame her. I was officially terrified. That message felt personal, targeted. Whatever was happening in my apartment knew my name. I hardly slept at all after that. I left most of the lights on and sat in bed with the TV droning quietly, just to feel less alone. Every little noise kept me wide awake and alert. Sometime around 3 a.m., I heard a loud bang from the kitchen. I jolted up. Then came another bang, the sound of a cabinet door slamming. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and crept down the hallway. In the pale bluish light of the TV, I could see the kitchen cabinets opening and slamming shut on their own, one after another, like an invisible tantrum was unfolding. The fridge door was ajar as well, its alarm beeping. I froze there in the hallway, watching in disbelief. Adrenaline overtook my fear for a moment, and I shouted, "Stop!" And just like that, everything did. The cabinets hung open, trembling slightly. The fridge door slowly swung closed as the alarm stopped. In the sudden silence, I realized I was shaking all over. In the reflection of the dark oven door, I thought I saw movement, a shape standing behind me. I spun around, swinging the bat, but nothing was there. I'd reached my breaking point. I didn't care if this was a haunting or I was having some kind of breakdown. I just knew I had to get out. I threw some essentials into a backpack, grabbed my keys and phone and bolted. As I hurried down the hall to the elevator, I heard one last sound from my apartment behind me. The distinct click of my bedroom door slamming shut on its own. It felt like an emphatic get out. I drove to a 24-hour diner that night and sat there in my pajamas and coat, sipping coffee until sunrise. I must have looked half-crazed, jumpy at every sound of the door chime or clatter of dishes. When morning came, I called my building management and demanded they let me out of my lease. To my surprise, they didn't put up much of a fight. I suspect I wasn't the first to make that request. Over the next week, I learned at least 3 other tenants on different floors had also moved out abruptly, citing unusual disturbances. We never compared all the details. We were all a bit embarrassed and maybe a little traumatized. But there was a knowing look we shared. With a couple of friends to help, I went back to the apartment in daylight to pack my things. The place was silent and still, exactly as a modern luxury apartment should be. But I no longer felt that it was my home. As we carried the last boxes out, I took one final look around. I wasn't expecting any answers to magically present themselves, and none did. The walls held their secrets. I locked the door behind me, leaving Redwood Apartments and whatever lurked there to someone else. In the weeks that followed, driven by a need for answers, I dug into the history of the old hospital that once stood where Redwood does now. What I found was chilling, but not surprising. Decades of patient abuse allegations, and a tragic fire in the 1990s that killed several patients who were trapped in a locked ward. Perhaps those horrors left a scar on that ground that even a shiny new building couldn't cover. Now, nearly a year later, I'm in a different apartment across town. It's an old 1960s building with creaky floors and no high-tech gadgets whatsoever. It might not be as sleek, but I sleep a lot better here. I still find myself lying in bed some nights, on high alert at the slightest creak or flicker of light. I catch myself listening for those faint whispers, even though I hope I never hear them again. What happened at Redwood Apartments has left a permanent mark on me. I never got a definitive explanation. Maybe the place was haunted by the hospital's past, or maybe I was just unraveling under stress in a very unsettling environment. Perhaps it was a bit of both. All I know is that I had to get out to save my sanity and possibly my life. I've shared my story here as a cautionary tale. A dream home can sometimes hide a nightmare. And if you ever sense that something's not right in your home, trust your gut and get out while you still can. This story reminds us that sometimes the walls around us carry secrets darker than we dare imagine. What seems like a dream home can quickly become a place you desperately want to escape. If your gut warns you something isn't right, listen carefully, because some warnings only come once. Some pasts refuse to stay buried.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained, and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.